if we don't solve multipolar traps and these generator functions of X risk, then we will self-terminate. I fully agree with that. But the question is, at what timeline? And so you can imagine a world where we're trying to solve these we're at this super abstract kind of meta level and trying to solve these kind of generator functions of X risk while, one of the X risks actually killed us. You can also imagine vice versa, where we only solve one of the X risks, but then the generator functions kill us. So how do you think about kind of the cost of delay there in terms of like what stuff we should focus on at which time?
If you are focusing on winning at the game that is killing everything, then you are asleep or insane.
I kind of agree, but wait, let me pause. Let me push back on that for a second. You can imagine a world in which, let's say, you and I had the ability to solve an existential risk. Let's say we could press a button and climate change went away or whatever. That'd be sweet. Or we could concentrate on solving the generator functions of X risk. I could see some versions and work on that for like a longer time or whatever. I could see a version of reality where certain people try to solve the X risk itself rather than the kind of meta level generator functions. Do you know what I'm saying?
We have to be focused on the generator functions, because otherwise, not only if we try and solve for a specific X risk that is a result of the underlying system architectures and dynamics that made that risk and lots of risks like it, not only do we not solve the other cases, but there is a decent chance that, as we've mentioned about goals before, we actually solve it in a way that makes something else more likely. And this is why, so when I said, if we are trying to win at the game that is killing everything, basically win at rival risk games, and we're asleep or insane, meaning we just either don't understand the phenomena or is something else wrong, then what we also realize is that trying to just keep addressing the symptoms without addressing what's causing them doesn't make any sense either. And so then we have to say, okay, well, at minimum, I want to focus on, if I don't know how to solve the underlying generator functions, I at least want to make sure that the actions that I'm doing, to the degree that they are successful, create precedents where if more people do them, the system at least moves in the right direction. It's a race to the top rather than a race to the bottom. I at least want to make sure I'm doing that. Meaning I'm creating dynamics where my ability to win is through better partnership rather than better rivalry, rather than the example where I figure out that if I get if I figure out how to factoryatize farms, I can produce more meat per dollar and have higher margins on my meat, moving towards ubiquitous factory farming that is just ruinous for everything. That's been a multipolar trap race to the bottom. The kind of free range or organic movement that is saying, no, people will actually pay more for the thing that is healthier and better for them, that also happens to be better for the world and less ethically terrible. Let's do something where, to the degree we succeed at this and other people follow, the system dynamics are better. That doesn't categorically solve for the issue of multipolar trap, but it at least says within the kinds of systems we understand, like capitalism, we're going to move system dynamics in the right direction. So one of the things people want to really focus on is the source of differential value that they're able to provide within any project, within capitalism, something that, to the degree that it's successful and other people try to replicate it, creates system dynamics that move in the right direction versus the wrong direction. That's at least one way that people can think about within the current systems how to be in the right direction.
Yep.
And of course, some people will be focused on how do we actually solve the underlying generator functions. And we spoke about the generator function from one perspective, which is that rival risk dynamics cause harm, and that exponential rivalry causing exponential harm self-terminates.
Yep.
There is another way of speaking about the generator function that is even more fundamental and abstract, and I think it would be worth sharing that because it speaks to what we have to change. If you're interested.
So, and actually, I was about to go there because we're operating at the level of what I would call meta X risk, the generator functions of X risk. We pushed down for a bit there to the actual X risks themselves, and now let's go actually one level of abstraction further up. So tell me, what is the thing that is actually one level above these generator functions of X risk?
Yeah. So the one generator function we've talked about, rival risk dynamics, we got that. I want to give one other example of a generator function, and then we'll go to an even more abstract unifying framework.
Great.
So when you mentioned, hey, let's say we solve climate change, is that adequate, and is it even an appropriate thing to do? So let's take an example where we're not focused on like increasing war through exponential tech, weaponization, or whatever, but we're focused on simply environmental collapse dynamics. So when we look at environmental damage dynamics, all the environmental damage that we look at can be thought of in terms of either depletion of unrenewable resources or accumulation of waste streams that aren't being processed in real time. And so accumulation and depletion, when we start to look at the examples, so I say, okay, accumulation, right, what we call toxicity, whether I'm talking about nitrogen runoff causing dead zones, or the plastic in the ocean, or mercury in the water or in the air, or uranium or carbon dioxide causing carbonic acid and ocean acidification, or carbon dioxide in the air, or any of those, right? The CFCs or HFCs that were the ozone hole problem, those are all special case examples of some kind of accumulation of something that doesn't have a feedback loop that can process it in real time, that has some externalized cost on the anti-fragility of the ecosystem writ large. If I try and focus on one of them and say, hey, I'm just going to sequester a bunch of CO2, but I'm not stopping the nitrogen runoff or the, any of those other ones, the biodiversity loss, the whatever, then what we'll find is I move the curve a tiny bit, but I haven't addressed the fact that there are many, many different metrics that are all moving to collapse from the same underlying dynamic. Similarly, on the other side of depletion, whether I'm talking about cutting down the old growth forests or overfishing the ocean or species extinction or biodiversity loss or peak nitrogen or peak phosphorus or any of those things, those are all examples similarly of unrenewable resource utilization and an exponential curve on how that is happening. So then we say, let's put those both together, and we look at that in a natural ecosystem like a forest, there is no unrenewable use of resource and there is no accumulated waste. Every new thing is made from old things. All the old things get turned into new things. So you have comprehensive loop closure. All the atoms are in closed loop atomic cycling, so that the atoms from one thing, when it dies, become new things at the same speed that things are dying at, or turning to waste. The anti-fragility of nature is a function of a few things, but primarily for this example, a function of closed loop dynamics. The fragility of the human-built world is largely a function of open-loop dynamics. So when we look at depletion on one side and accumulation on the other, those are the two sides of a linear atomic economy or materials resource economy, that we can say the underlying dynamic of linear flows rather than closed loop cycles, or open loops in a network diagram is the way we define toxicity writ large. Then we need to work on the generator function, not of just this one specific accumulation or depletion issue, but how do we have a process by which comprehensive loop closure is built into the choice-making processes of all humans everywhere?
Yep.
And as soon as we start thinking about it that way, not just like how could we do it somewhere, but how do we create a different type of behavioral dynamics, from incentive structures to collective intelligence structures, so basically the sense-making and choice-making dynamics that lead to all agents thinking about and working towards comprehensive loop closure, that is now at a meta level to all of the specific instantiations. So now we go one level deeper and we say, we talked about rival risk dynamics multiplied by exponential tech, self-terminates. We also talked about linear flows, open loop flows on a finite planet also ends up leading to collapse dynamic. There is something that unifies both of those. So we can say it's a meta X risk.
Yep.
And we notice that both of these involve specifically human choice empowered by technology in relationship with some kind of world or commons, right? And so if I look at rival risk dynamics, if there wasn't exponential tech, if we stayed with stone tools, we wouldn't really have any risk of self-induced extinction. We would just keep killing each other. But we wouldn't kill everybody. We couldn't have a war that killed everybody, and we wouldn't be able to cut down all the trees, right?
Yep.
And so specifically, it requires not just tech, but ever-growing tech, right? Tech feedback curves.
Yep.
And similarly, if our tools were limited to a size where, like, say we had just fishing lines, not mile-long drift nets, we wouldn't fish all the fucking fish out of the ocean. But as soon as we've got mile-long drift nets and we've got D9s taking down forests and slash and burn, whatever else, then again, we start to see these fragility dynamics get larger than the playing field can handle, because you've got movements that are faster than the anti-fragility can process. Now we say, why is that? And here's the key insight for all the people that are thinking about how can we use technology to make the world better and use technology in a fundamentally evolutionary way.